In today's show, I want to welcome Trevor Burns from Whisler Rum. And I heard an interesting story about the name of your rum the other day. Where does it come from, Trev?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask us why in the world would we open a distillery in the Free State? We're miles away from sugarcane. So that just doesn't seem to make sense. And really, it comes down to the philosophy of rum. So, I always tell people if you think of the whiskey drinker, typically you get this picture in your mind of an old person on an armchair with a glass in their hand and a cigar in the other hand,
and a tweed jacket.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And then if you think of the gin drinker, you get someone sitting on a stoop watching the sunset. Well, both of those characters, the world is busy happening to them, while the rum person happens to the world. So the rum person is out there, they're having fun, they're doing their own thing, they're making their own rules, or as we like to call it, whistle your own tune.
Yes.
And that's where the name came from. Whistler is all about whistling your own tune. And that's what drove us to make this distillery in the Free State. We opened this distillery in the Free State. It's not a question of why, it's a question of why not.
There was a nice expression in Afrikaans about the whistling.
Yeah, fluit jou eie dinkie.
Fluit jou eie dinkie. I like that. Like most distillers, your story starts somewhere sipping a good whiskey or a good gin, or in your case, a good rum, or is that not how it starts?
No. In fact, it's the opposite. We're sipping very poor rum. We were in Mozambique on a holiday, and we were, as most South Africans do when they're out there, do R&R. And honestly, it's good for fun, but it's really horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And that just got us thinking, So, is it that hard? Can we do it better? Why not try it ourselves? So we started doing research. This was back in 2015. So we did research on rum, making rum. How do you go about it? Is there a market for new entrants, et cetera, et cetera? And it just got us very excited. So the more we looked at it, the more we liked the idea. And by the end of 2015, we had bought a small little distillation system, 50-liter pot still. And we were making rum in my brother's garage. In fact, I came across one of the pictures of the garage last night, just by chance. At the time we were thinking, geez, we're killing this thing. We're making fantastic rum. And recently, it must have been about a month ago, we actually came across some of the stock we produced back then, and it's awful stuff. We went from a bad to a little bit better, but not much better, and now with a really good product.
Okay, and if you're distilling rum, you obviously there's a couple of ways to do it, and we've got some distilleries here in KZN that are using sugarcane juice, and the big distillers, or most of the distillers, choose to use molasses. Is that right?
That's right. It very much depends on the style of rum that you're producing. So, so there are hundreds of styles of rum out there. So us as South Africans, we've actually been sold short on really good rums.
Yeah.
So if you go to the French Virgin Isles in the Caribbean, they typically use raw sugarcane as per the distilleries in KZN.
Yeah.
And it produces a very different flavor to a rum produced from molasses. It's very much up to the consumer to decide which flavors work best for them. And you really can't say that the one's better than the other. They're just different. Yes, yeah. So rum is produced from sugarcane. They tend to have almost a lot greener type of flavor to it. They tend to be somewhat lighter, and they've got this green, tangy kind of character to it. Whereas molasses flavors tend to have a heavier character, a much darker character. But again, it very much depends on how it's fermented and how it's distilled, and then on the consumer's preferences. So you really can't compare the two. They are night and day from each other. A rum produced from molasses versus a rum produced from fruit.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast called Shift Drink Podcast, which is run by a guy called Ed I think he's in Indianapolis, and he owns a whole lot of tiki bars, and he's a rum fanatic. So I'm trying to educate myself, and maybe you should contact this Ed and get onto his podcast.
I will do that. Yeah.
He is really it is fascinating to listen to the rum producers from around the world and really try and, without drinking what they're producing, obviously you can't do that on listening to a podcast, but it's fascinating.
Yes.
The culture and the whole market around rum. It's much older, from what I can gather. It's much older, and the roots are much more entrenched than even whiskey.
Very much so. It's the oldest spirit. People were fermenting and distilling from sugar long before somebody attempted to do the same with grain. So it's certainly an older spirit around there, and it's got as you mentioned, as deep roots as the most well-known whiskies out there. It's just us as South Africans being at the southern tip of Africa. It's just unfortunate we've been, we really haven't had access to that type of culture for our entire history, really.
Yeah.
So back when we started, we did a training course on rum production at the Moonshine University in Kentucky.
Okay, Mark Taylor also went there.
Yeah, it's a phenomenally good course. And what was awesome was that they gave us a really, it is very much a bird's eye view, but a rough overview of the rum landscape. And the course went through a couple of days, and every day we went and tasted different styles of rum. And yes, it was fascinating. The flavors, the different flavors that come out, and how enjoyable those spirits are by themselves. Again, as South Africans only really know rum and coke, whereas the rums that are produced, in these areas where it goes back, hundreds of years, those rums are phenomenal, and as enjoyable, if not more enjoyable than a really good Scotch whiskey.
So if I think of my first experience with rum, we used to go to the Natal Spa, which is like a hot spring resort not far from my parents' farm, and we must have been 13 or 15, and we'd pinched my dad's red hot rum, and my uncle, that's what they used to drink. And we'd go down to the swimming pools and sip this stuff, obviously with Coke, but I've got good memories of those days, but I can't say that I'm a regular rum drinker, and nor do I know many regular rum drinkers. And you probably don't even want to call that rum.
No, there's nothing wrong with red hot. It's got its space to play in, and it serves a purpose. The rums that we are just interested in are, it's not, the typical rums in South Africa you would drink over the course of a weekend. Yeah. Whereas, the rum that we want to produce, is something that you'll drink over the course of a month or even months.
Okay.
It's something that you want to savor and enjoy and appreciate for the effort that went into it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about starting your distillery, because we met over, I guess, email and social media. It feels like many years ago. When did you actually start the distillery?
So when we finished our course, this was in early 2016. So by then we had done tons of homework. We had a friend of mine who's a process engineer lined up to design and build our distillery. And then we took everything that we learned overseas, came back, included those into the designs, and started building the distillery. This was April or May 2016.
Okay.
So we started ordering equipment out of the Western Cape. Some of the equipment, so the fermentation tanks and so on, we got out of the Western Cape. And we finalized some of the other pieces of equipment, and the distillery was completed by December 2016.
Okay.
So by the end of December 2016, we were already producing, or at least experimenting with production. And we started selling product nearly a year later. Because everything's barrel aged, we can't really start out the gate, at least not with Whisler. So we started selling product in November 2017.
Okay. So
and I think you and we spoke over email. It was somewhere in 2017, I think.
Okay.
When we started speaking over email. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we finally met. When was it? In the beginning of the year at the tourism in Durban in Durban.
That's right. Yeah. It was actually quite nice to be there.
And the listeners must look out. There's a video when the Minister of Tourism, or the then Minister of Tourism, came to your stand, and he was quite positive about your rum, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah. He was very, very excited. I look forward to seeing a declaration of the bottle that we gave him in his. They got to declare all their gifts, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to be looking out and see if our rum is declared in his gifts.
Yeah.
And his parliament list.
Yeah. So what I think everybody asks is, when is the big rum wave going to hit the market? And I find it quite irritating. Because people I always say, don't anticipate, participate, start experimenting and start trying it yourself rather than waiting and talking about it. But for the trade and for consumers, maybe just a little bit about rum and maybe the process of how you make rum, and then what to look out for in a good rum. Because me, like many in the trade, I think we buy with our eyes and we just look at the bottle and we write off the category because it is a fairly small category. But there must be some way that the trade can help you to build this category.
Well, it's sort of a two-way street, this one. In that you are right, the trade needs to participate, but at the same time, us as producers, we need to simplify the use of our products for them. If we go back to the gin game, the gin producers came up with a lot of the initial ideas on cocktails and so on, and the trade then caught onto it and then further innovated on that basis. And sort of the same thing needs to happen on the rum side of it. So us as producers, we have to start off by providing some education on how to use these products. Because for me, the most common question that we get is, okay, I've bought this bottle. what I do now?
Yeah.
And that's a fair question.
It's got an easy answer. Just add Coke to it.
See, but that's the thing, is that you want people to play wider than that, because rum is such a versatile spirit that you can use it in almost any traditional cocktail.
Yeah.
At our distillery, we do everything from from what you would expect with rum, so mojitos, daiquiris, etc., to things that you would traditionally want to do with gin. So we've got cocktails produced with tonic and a set of syrup, and they're all equally enjoyable.
Yeah.
But again, the question is, how do we get the trade to catch on to that trend? And it boils down to education. So back to your question on how do people identify good rums? I think price is a starting point. Unfortunately, that's how it works. You would want to try and look at rums above 250 rand. So it's not a massive stretch from what rums do cost at the moment. But if you want to have a better experience, that is where you're going to have to start looking at.
But that's still that's still fairly cheap if you compare it to some of the craft gins.
Very much so. And that's what I'm saying is that, yeah. But it depends on what you want to do. From 250 rand to say 350 rand, you're sort of transitioning from cocktail spirits to sipping spirits. So some of the rums from the 250 rand to 350 rand you would want to sip, but then some of those are better suited towards cocktails. The second thing that consumers should do is figure out how these things are produced. So a lot of these products are, there's a lot of bells and whistles and smoke and mirrors involved. They tell a very good story, but the products aren't necessarily produced well. The third argument that I would make, and I'm going to irritate a lot of people now, is that I would start off by trying rums produced by rum producers. So people who focus on rums. That doesn't mean that the gin producers who are venturing into rum produce poor rums. I just think you're going to get a better experience from rum producers out there who all they do day in and day out is produce rum.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that doesn't mean that gin producer producing rum is producing poor rum. It's just, I would, if I had to hedge bets, if I'm paying 400 rand for a bottle, I'm going to prefer to buy from a guy who that's all he does. He produces rum.
Yeah.
And then later down the line, you experiment then with other rums that's on the shelf.
Yeah, because
and there are plenty of rums out there. There are plenty of. In South Africa alone, there are, I think, 8 guys who produce rum only. Some of them have a gin as an add-on, but that's fine because gin is an add-on, not rum as an add-on.
Yeah.
And then if you add some gin producers into the mix who produce rum as well, I think we're in the mid-20s producers just in South Africa producing rum.
Yeah.
So there's a fair amount of rums out there to choose from. And you'll do yourself a big favor by trying them. I honestly can tell you that, especially the guys who are avid rum drinkers. They've stuck with Captain Morgan and Red Hot and the like for many, many years, and they're now at a point where they might be earning a little bit more and they want to treat themselves, but they don't want to treat themselves with expensive whiskey or expensive gins. They want to stick to the flavor that they know. Well, then I would tell those people, your next step is to, add 50 rand or 100 rand to your budget and buy a rum that's been matured in barrels. Buy a rum that's been produced on small scales. Buy rums that have been produced in pot stalls. Those things, they really do add a lot of character and a lot of enjoyment to the spirit.
Trevor, tell us maybe a little bit about the different styles of rum that people can look out for.
So again, I sort of wish we had more of these rums available in South Africa.
Yeah.
But then many styles. So people would know the Jamaican styles of rum. Well, they would have heard of it. They probably wouldn't have had it. So typically Jamaican styles rums are what they call high ester rum. So what it means is it's just got a ton of flavor in it. So these rums are produced in a very specific way. I'm not going to go into technicalities of it.
Those were the ones that they used to export to Germany.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So they've got a historical relationship with Germany where I think it was just after the war. The Germans are big fans of rum. I think it might be to do with the fact that they don't want to drink whiskey because it was at the time it was their arch enemies.
Yeah.
Anyways, but they were big fans of rum, but there weren't a lot of money around. So what they did was they had the Jamaicans make really, really super high flavored rums, or what they call high ester rums. Ship those rums over to Germany and then water the flavor down with neutral spirit and end up with a similar flavor.
Okay.
So it was sort of a cost thing, but it resulted in a very unique style, unique to Jamaica.
Okay.
Then you get what they call a navy rum. So navy rums are there's really no specific flavor profile to it, so it's not necessarily produced with molasses or with sugarcane. It is typically a blend, so it's produced by mixing rums from all around the Caribbean into a single rum. Typically, that was how it's done. Obviously, there's more to it.
And is it?
Then you have.
Is it also like the navy gin that it's stronger than the normal product?
No, but there is a version of it called gunpowder, where I think that has to be 56% or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on the details. So there are variants within the categories.
Mm.
And some of them do go stronger and some of them don't. It sort of varies within the category and so on. So it's not quite clear cut on exactly how the different styles work. Another relatively clear style is agricole. So agricole is typically produced using sugarcane directly. So they use the sugarcane juice, ferment that and distill it. Then another version is cachaça. So some people might have heard of that. So that is a agricole variant that's produced in Brazil. So it's something that has to be produced in Brazil. And so on and so forth. So there are many styles. We, as Whisler, we've come up with a concept of African style.
Which is your own thing.
It is, but it's not something that we want to... So it's something that we trademarked, but not with the purpose of keeping it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. The whole purpose behind it is just actually to protect a set of rules. So if someone else wants to produce under the African style concept, they're more than welcome to, but they have to tick the boxes. And in short, there's a little bit more to it, but in short, there's 5 rules. First rule, it's got to be produced in Africa. That one's relatively easy. Second rule is it's got to be produced using equipment that was designed and built in Africa.
Yeah.
The third rule is it's got to be a local distiller, so a local born and bred distiller. Fourth rule, the alcohol must be produced using locally sourced ingredients. So in our case, we use molasses out of KZN combined with brown sugar. Well, it's like a brown sugar treacle that we get out of Swaziland. Then the final rule, and probably one of the most important rules in the process, the alcohol must be matured in barrels that have previously matured alcohol in Africa. So for our two main products, our dark rum and our spiced rum, we use a combination of old brandy barrels that were previously used in the Western Cape and old whiskey barrels also previously used in the Western Cape. So by doing that, we get a uniquely African flavored product. So starting off with in South Africa, so our climate influences the flavor of the eventual spirit that you bottle, number one. The local equipment, the type of equipment. So it was interesting when we were doing our training. One point that was made quite frequently was that one still distillation system versus the next distillation system, even if it was produced by the exact same manufacturer, produces different flavors. So by having the equipment produced in South Africa, we end up having a uniquely South African flavor in it by default. The third thing is a local distiller. So you want to use a local distiller because you're producing spirit for an African palate. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure it works for us as South Africans.
Okay.
The fourth rule, the local ingredients, that sort of speaks for itself. Again, local flavor coming into the spirit. And finally, maturing in barrels that have been used here before. Again, it adds some of the local flavor that's really well known around the world into our spirit. And it ends up being creating a spirit that you can't find anywhere else. It's as unique as the most unique spirit out there.
And have you managed to get other producers on board?
To date, no. We've had people contact us with interest, interested, and we've had people interested in buying mature products. But none of those projects have come through yet.
Yeah.
But we have had interest, yes. We're hoping that this competition that we won recently will contribute and help motivate people to follow that process.
Yeah, tell us about that. That was the old mutual trophy, wasn't it?
That's right, yes. So in our world, massive competition. Really, really well-respected judges from all around the world. Were thrown in by Old Mutual, and they looked at a number of spirits. So it was the first year that they held a spirits-only competition. There were 200 entrants. I'm not sure how many entrants of those were rums. I just know that at least 5 nationalities were involved in the rum category, which makes us quite proud because it means that we won a competition and we were up against some massive names from around the world, which obviously it does tell us that we're doing something right.
Yeah. And the judges, I mean, do spirit judges judge all spirits or are they specialist rum judges? There's always a question around these types of competitions on exactly that. This competition, I would say, was probably biased towards whiskey, which again isn't a bad thing for us because it means that whiskey drinkers can appreciate our rum. That does add quite a lot of weight to the competition. Yeah.
There are competitions around the world where they have rum specialists participating. But as I say, I think, in this case, the judging was a little bit more weighted towards whiskey judges.
Yeah, which is better than if they were weighted towards gin.
Absolutely. That already raises a question. I was involved with a competition a couple of years ago where I was a judge at the competition. We weren't entered. It was before we opened, actually.
Yeah.
And it was, it was a rum-only competition, and it was super frustrating sitting there as a rum person because half of the panel didn't drink spirits, never mind, rum. And it just removed all credibility in my mind, at least from the result.
Yeah. So in terms of the rum market, how many? I mean, have you come across a lot of what do you call them, rum fanatics or whatever? In South Africa, have you? I mean, there must be some that you've met at exhibitions or at shows or at tastings. I mean, if you look at the Whiskey Live festivals and the gin festivals.
So gin festivals, we're not big fans of gin festivals or taking rum to a gin festival because the consumer's mindset is such that they expect everything with tonic.
Yeah.
When they get there. And you're talking to a consumer that prefers gin. I always say, it's like trying to sell meat to a vegan. It just doesn't, it just doesn't work. You're talking to the wrong type of customer.
Yeah.
Whiskey Festival was better because the whiskey drinkers in general are a lot more open-minded and willing to try different spirits, and also they prefer drinking it neat, so they can appreciate our rums for what it is, and how, in our mind at least, it should be drunk. So that was better, and you do get some people there who are massive rum fanatics, and they've been to the Caribbean, and they've been to Mauritius, and they've been to many places around the world where good rum is produced, and they get very excited because there's something proper produced in South Africa. But it is kind of difficult to reach them through those types of events because they don't go to them. If it's not a rum event and you're a rum guy, then why would you go there?
Yeah. And
so there's a culture that needs to be developed around rum festivals. It is starting, and there are a couple of really good festivals around that I would recommend. So there's a small little festival at Klein Kaap and Centurion. We went this year, and it was absolutely worthwhile. Really, really good. It wasn't a massive turnout, but the people who arrive are people who are interested.
Yeah.
Another one that we found was worthwhile was by show managers in near Lanseria. Forget the place's name. Anyways, that one was also well attended and massively good interest. It's the right type of crowd that arrives. But then you get other events that, and I'm not going to name names, but that really revolves around international players giving them money and pushing the show.
Yeah.
And that just distracts from value because you get these really massive producers bunting the whole story, and then the whole show ends up being about them, and it really misses the point.
Yeah.
The people who arrive there, it tends to be the wrong type of customer again, and it just doesn't do anything for us as small scale producers.
Yeah. And are there any rum producers you are open to the public? You invite you want visitors to come and obviously visit your distillery, like the craft brewers. How often are you open to the public?
We're open every Saturday, and we're open from 11 to around 7 p.m.
Okay. So for me, just in terms of the location, for me, the Free State is obviously, everybody knows Harry Smith because you drive through it, and then Clarence with this wonderful beer fest. And the only other places that I have been on my sales trip is Welkom and Bloemfontein. So where are you guys situated?
We're close to Welkom, so we're closer to Henneman, which is actually just next door to Welkom.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're halfway between Henneman and Riebeekstad. So Riebeekstad being a sort of a part of Welkom, a small section of Welkom, and we're on a farm halfway between the two towns. If you put it into Google Maps, it'll take you to our front door.
Okay. So that works. I know
Yeah.
when I started, I worked on a maps of all the distilleries in South Africa, and it was really hard to find anything on a map. And I went around adding people not only to my map but also to Google Maps. So yeah, if Google Maps works, it's a good thing. And
yeah, it helps. Yeah, and we've had it. So when we initially had it on Google Maps, it would take you through back roads, and you end up at an old entrance to the farm that doesn't exist anymore. So you couldn't actually reach it that way. So there's a long story to change the routing to actually get people to the front door.
Is that even possible?
Yeah, well, it was possible. We just had to sort of cheat the system a little bit.
Okay. Now, tell me about your rums. You make, I think when I met you in Durban, you had 3 different rums. The one was phenomenal, yes. and completely unexpectedly so, because it was a clear rum.
Yes, yeah. So people would expect, and rightly so, expect that an aged spirit has got a color to it.
Yes.
Well, our aged silver rum is actually colorless, and the reason for that is we age it in a set of barrels for the rum is now just short of 3 years old, and then we filter the color out.
Okay.
And you end up with a spirit that's got really subtle flavors, like smooth banana, caramel, and berries, sort of all interlaced. It's just massively awesome. I think it's a really, really epic rum.
It is.
It's at the moment you can only get it through our distillery, and probably within the next week on our online store.
Okay, so that's a big draw card.
Yeah. Well, it's the only place where you can get it. It's really, really limited supply. We can only produce about 80 bottles a month of that, because it's such a difficult process to follow. And because of it, it's limited supply, and you can really only get it there. I can't remember if we spoke about it when we were at Durban together, but we've got a couple of other rums that's in the pipeline.
No, we didn't.
We've done we've done a barrel exchange with Boplaas wines. So the Boplaas name is quite well known in South Africa. So Boplaas, their whiskey distiller Daniel, they won a couple of competitions last year with their whiskey, having the best whiskey in the country, or best locally produced whiskey, and it really is phenomenal. So what we did with them was they emptied some of those award-winning whiskey barrels. They kept the whiskey to themselves. We emptied our rum barrels, and then drove the rum barrels down to Krugersdorp, exchanged it for their whiskey barrels. They then filled those rum barrels with their whiskey, and we've taken their barrels back to our distillery and filled them with our rum. So there's going to be, it's sort of a once-off I think we're doing 400 or 800, I think 400 bottles is the total that we can produce out of those barrels. But we're very excited. So we've had rum in there. So essentially we're doing a finish in a whiskey cask. And we're doing it's going to be between 6 months and a year that we'll be finishing it on. We only started tasting it now. About a week ago, we started tasting that rum, and it is awesome. Really, really, really awesome. So that's a really nice project that we're busy with. Then we've got a Solera that's on the way. So the Solera is, so some people would have read about Solera. It's a specific aging methodology.
And that's from Spain, or is it from Portugal?
Spain. It's a Spanish concept. Spain. I'm pretty sure it's Spain. So it's a Spanish concept that was used in the sherry or port. I can't remember. Anyways, it's one of those sweet wines where they use this aging methodology to achieve constant flavors from one year to the next. because obviously you don't get constant flavors. It's very much dependent on the rainfall and the climate, et cetera, of that specific year.
Yeah.
So we use it for a different reason. So also for consistency from one batch to the next. But the other reason that we use it for is that we can play around with barrels, massively play around with barrels in the system. So included in that aging system is port barrels, brandy barrels, whiskey barrels, bourbon barrels, white wine barrels, and red wine barrels. And some of them have been treated differently. Some of them we retoasted, some of them we left as is, et cetera, et cetera. And what you end up with is, you start off with a really full flavored rum, and then you add all of this range of flavors from this range of barrels into a spirit, and you end up with a really, really complex spirit with like a reddish color that it gets from the port barrels. A really, really awesome rum that we're quite excited about. We haven't quite decided whether we're going to be bottling it at 42% or at barrel strength of around 58%.
Mm-hmm.
So not quite a debate internally on what's the most appropriate route on that. I suspect we'll probably do it somewhere halfway between the two. So that's quite exciting. Then we've got a toasted coconut rum that's being developed. It's a pain in the arse to develop, but we're getting there. And a number of others, but those are sort of the only ones that I want to communicate at this point in time.
Yeah. So Trevor, you should really reach out to Greg Casey at Banana Jam in Cape Town. Greg started his bar as a rum bar many years ago, and I think he had a few around Cape Town. But it's really become a craft beer destination, and I want to go as far as saying it's my favorite craft beer destination in South Africa. Shout out to Greg. And Greg, upstairs in his, he owns the building, and upstairs he has managed to get a license to brew beer. And he would be the perfect guy to do barrel exchanges with if you want to use, if you want to do something with beer, and he loves rum.
We are actually, we're doing something with beer. I just forgot about it, but we've got a barrel exchange with a beer producer in Welkom. But it's something that we're completely open to because there's so many varieties of beer.
Yes.
It's actually an easy and relatively short project to work on. So we are very much keen to work on those kind of projects. It's something that we're quite excited about. I think in South Africa, there's an import called Innocent Gun. That's a rum finished beer.
Yes.
That's quite popular. Well, we're trying to do something similar, except that you can buy a package together, so you've got beer finished rum and rum finished beer in one package. And you can, taste both the spirit and the beer and see how the flavors transfer from one to the other. And I just think it improves the experience. I think people who are really interested in this kind of stuff would want to buy that kind of product just to better understand it and better experience it.
Yeah, and I think it also gives you a product to sell at your distillery to people that...
Obviously, yes. Yeah.
So, reach out to Greg. He always comes up all the way from Cape Town. He comes up to the Clarence Beer Festival, and I'm sure you could convince him to spend another couple of days in Henneman exploring your distillery.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually down there on Thursday and Friday, so I might as well just pop by.
Oh, yeah. So talking about Greg, that always brings me to the next topic. I mean, craft beer is all about building a tribe. How have you managed? Have you had any success in building a following in South Africa? And how have you done that?
We certainly have quite a nice following in the Henneman area. And what's become quite clear over the past week since we won this competition is that there's a lot of people that are keeping their eyes on this type of product. And I think within a week, our Facebook following climbed to something like 200 or something.
Okay.
Whereas it usually climbs by about 10 or 20. So I think by keeping on and keeping on innovating, you end up having followers by default.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what we've seen, is that stay true, keep on innovating, and keep on thinking about the people who drink your product, and ultimately your tribe will follow.
Yeah, and maybe in terms of building an event like the Clarence Beer Festival, is that something that you've looked at?
It is something that we've looked at. We just really haven't had. We haven't come up with the right venue yet. Although that problem might solve itself in the near future. I don't want to elaborate on it, but it looks like there might be an opportunity for all of our producers in the near future to work together.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting stuff. And where is your rum available now? It's in most Pick n Pays?
Most Pick n Pays and most Topses, some Ultra Liquors, some Liquor Cities, and that's around the country. So the easiest way to find it is to go on our website, go under stockists, and there's like an interactive map. You put in where you stay, and it'll tell you where your closest stockist is. Okay.
And your website? Where can people find you?
Whislerrum.co.za. Really easy. And that's 2 R's, so it's Whisler Rum.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. I really think it's been useful, and it's always important, I think, not only to learn about your story, but about the category. I think it's a growing category. It's an interesting category, and
absolutely.
And both consumers and the trade need to learn more about it, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to chat, and if people want to find out more, they can email us at info@whislerrum.co.za. We're always available to answer questions and maybe even help out with tastings, etc., etc.
Okay. And congratulations on your award.
Thank you very much. We're super proud of it, and very, very happy with the result. And certainly have seen that it's helped people take notice of some really good products made right here in our backyards.
Yeah, wonderful. And that's Trevor from Whisler Rum, and that's in Henneman in the Free State. Thank you for taking the time to tune in, and cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Holger. I really enjoyed it.